Picking herbs outside the Tao. It's a strange expression. What does it mean? Some people among you may not know what the Tao is. The Tao, T-A-O. The Tao is Chinese term, comes from Taoism. Tao is an untranslatable word, really. It means the way, it means the path, it means harmony, it means flow, it means the cosmic way. You know, it means many things. Dharma, it has many layers of meaning, but it's about how in tune we are with the entire cosmos, how we attune this body, this being, this individual illusion with the whole. So it's a bit like coming into tune with the whole orchestra of existence, the Tao. And so when we talk this expression from ancient Taoist mystery teachings, gathering herbs outside the Tao, it's a joke, really. There is no outside the Tao. Everything is contained, but it's an old Taoist joke from the sages. And what it refers to is on our journey of awakening, it refers to using substances mostly to help our journey upwards and outwards and beyond. And when I say substances, it can be all kinds of things. The most obvious one in our day and age, substances are psychedelics, right? So the use of psychedelics. Psychedelics have been used by ancient shamans since the beginning of time to help propel our consciousness into wider states of being so that we can commune with the ancestors or with the cosmic beings or see into the future or see deeper into ourselves. And so, although I'm not a specific journey with psychedelics and it's not been a huge part of my journey, I have dabbled in it, particularly as a teenager or in my young 20s and a little bit later on. But it's not been a massive part of my way, but it is a part of many people's way. And it's not just psychedelics, though, and there are also a whole host of things that come under that. It's also substances or any external technology that kind of puts the body and the awareness into a different, heightened state. So even restrictive diets of different forms can do that. Now, again, I'm not advocating any of these things. I'm just pulling out this wonderful phrase, picking herbs outside the Tao. And for me personally, what I would, if you're interested in any of this stuff, my way is the way of tea. Now, the way of tea is wonderful because it's very, very safe. And tea is something that you can drink on a daily basis. Psychedelics, you wouldn't necessarily take them on a daily basis. They're too, you might be microdosing small amounts, and that's a slightly different journey. But, tea is great because you can integrate it into everyday life very easily as a contemplative tool. And what it does for me, and I can only speak through my experience, is because I now know the right teas for my body, and that's a journey in itself. It kind of accelerates and quickens my frequency, particularly early in the morning, and opens me up very, very sweetly, very gently into the contemplative state. And I can do it without tea, but tea now becomes almost, it's almost like a little custom that I've woven into my contemplative practice. And you can do it with anything. The danger, because there is always a danger with any technology that we're using to enhance our awakening or our consciousness, is that we, of course, become fixated on it, and we then use it or abuse it. We use it too much. or we become addicted to it. And that may not be a physical addiction. It might be an emotional addiction to the heightened state. And you see, ideally, you want to be able to attain those heightened states without the technology, without the external technology. Otherwise, it becomes a crutch. It becomes the only way you've developed to get there. And that's where it comes to the difference between states and stages. So anyone can take any substance at any time and attain a state, a heightened state, hopefully. And then have an experience or a flash or an enlightened flash of a higher evolution or of different dimensions. But that's very different from a stage. To get to a stage, you have to have worked through many layers, a lot of your own shadow material, a lot of your own trauma has to be processed over a long period of time. It takes work, it takes self-discipline, it takes a lot to be able to follow and a teaching and be able to arrive at a new stage in consciousness. So it's really important to be clear with ourselves about states and stages, and if we are using technologies to enhance our reality, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We have to do it carefully. I would always advise doing it carefully with people who know what they're doing, who you can trust, who you've tested, and you can learn from. And of course, for some of us, that in itself is a whole journey. And I've heard many stories of people who have trusted others who seem to have wisdom and knowledge, but don't. And it turns out they didn't have integrity, and then there's all kinds of trouble that happens, and a great learning at the end of the day. All of these things are for us to learn greater levels of discernment, and discernment is key. But let's not become fixated on them. There's a massive upsurge at the moment in interest in these things, particularly in the psychedelics. Because I think there's been such a hunger of people who haven't been on spiritual paths. Specifically, they're just exhausted by the material world that we've created, this world of materialism and the shallowness of it, and all the many distractions. And so people are then looking for an experience of heightened consciousness. But please be careful if you are into these things. Gathering herbs from outside the Tao is a tricky business. You need to do it carefully. You need to do it with real self-awareness. If you are getting hooked into that high is not the point. The point is not to get high. The point is to be free. Those are two very different things. To be free doesn't involve that you're always high, or you're getting high, or you have to get high. And, to be free is to be free. And that's the part that takes work. It's the part that takes maturity. It takes you discovering your own inner wisdom. So I advise the path of contemplation, because the path of contemplation can pick up and put down anything, but isn't attached to any of them. So even for me with my tea practice and my tea journey, every now and again, I will just say, right, I'm not going to do it this week. I'm just going to have hot water, just drink the basis of the tea, which is the hot water. And there's a real kind of purity in that. And it's like, I suppose the next level will be just do away with the cups and just, drink the air, drink the existence, because that's what these things are really showing us and leading us to. So gathering herbs outside the Tao, old Taoist joke, think about these things, look at your own life, be really aware if you are overusing something and you become hooked to it, and realize that, there's a big difference between you just using it to get to a state and you having to actually do the everyday grind of the work, of the self-discipline that leads to you attaining a higher stage in your own evolutionary consciousness. One of my favorites I'll finish with is Hamvash Bella. Many of you know, I've mentioned him, a Hungarian sage, and he used wine. His muse was wine, and most people wouldn't think of that. They just think, people just drink wine because they like it. But actually, Hamvash used it as a an access portal to the deep sensual intoxication of existence. Now, the thing is, you can't drink too much. So he would only drink a little tiny bit each time, because it's a toxin. Now, all these things are toxins, right? So we're ingesting small amounts of toxins, or sometimes large amounts of toxins, and then our body's going through this process. So, you can use anything, but just use it carefully with real respect. And if you are exploring these things, make sure you have the wisdom of someone who really has gone deep and isn't hooked to them or trying to make a fast buck, or trying to get recognition, or, caught in an ego trip, a spiritual ego trip. Just be really clear. Many of these things have lineages that are connected to them, and it's really important to honor the source lineage in many of these cases, and, follow it back to the source, because there you get the purest sense of how these herbs from outside the Tao, which are really inside the Tao, can be used to our maximum advantage. But be careful. Much love.